Hey friends, welcome back to Farm Bread. I'm Kate, and today or tonight I'm going to be showing you how to make a very special treat. It is a Danish rye bread. So what's great about this bread in particular is the flavor. With the amazing texture that's really dense, you get a very kind of tangy flavor, and we also incorporate some seeds like sunflower seeds. We'll incorporate pumpkin seeds, and then also some sesame seeds. It's really a treat. This is something that I grew up having. Anytime that we would go over to Denmark, we would have this type of bread. And so during the holidays, even though we might not be in Denmark, this is something that I always like to make, especially when we're gonna be around my dad, because it brings back that nostalgia and that kind of flavor that I used to get at home. So we'll typically have this with open face sandwiches, or kind of like an appetizer. I'll serve it with marinated herring. I'm gonna show you the tools that you're going to need to get started, as well as the ingredients that you're going to need to start the dough. Now, keep in mind, this is still a sourdough, right? So we are going to have to let this sit overnight. The bulk rise will be for about 24 hours. So we won't come back to this for about 24 hours.
Welcome to Farm Bread. I'm Kate, and I make simple, delicious artisan breads here on our little backyard farm. Making bread doesn't need to be complicated. Do not overthink it. Trust your instincts, take some risks, and have fun in the process. And always remember, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Okay, friends, so to start, we have our bowl here. You're gonna need a nice big bowl. We have our kitchen scale, measuring cup, which I just used to fill with water. We have our Danish dough whisk. So this is basically all you need to really get started when you're going to be mixing your dough, right? The ingredients that you are going to need is an active and bubbly starter. You can see mine has some bubbles, it's active. You're gonna need water, some warm water. We have rye flour, which is a whole organic fresh milled rye flour that I have. And then I have a high protein bread flour. We also have a pink Himalayan salt. And our special ingredients are molasses. We're gonna have sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, and pumpkin seeds. So this is going to be a real treat. Okay, so first things first, we have our bowl. We're putting it on our scale, and we are zeroing it out. Then we're going to add 150 grams of our active starter. Then we are going to add 360 grams of warm water and about 20 grams of our molasses. All right, there we go, that's good. Now we are going to stir this together. I love my Danish dough whisk for this. I feel like it really incorporates the ingredients nicely. At this point, we are good. So now we can add our flours. So I'm going to add 240 grams, make sure to zero out your scale, 240 grams of rye flour. After the rye flour, I will be adding 150 grams of the bread flour. So I'm going to zero out my scale, and I'm going to add 150 grams. Last but not least, I'll be adding 5 grams of the pink Himalayan salt. Now I can remove this from the scale and stir everything together. Now this is going to resemble kind of like a mush. It's going to be very wet, and it's not going to look quite like a dough, like your typical sourdoughs that you're used to. It almost, in a way, looks a little bit muddy. You see how nicely this integrates all of the ingredients. I love this tool. It's one of my favorite baking tools. And we can scrape up the bottom just to make sure that we have all the ingredients incorporated, and we do. All right. So now I will scrape the edges down as much as I can. So now we are going to add the fillings. I'm actually going to put this back on the scale. I'm going to zero it out. We're going to add 20 grams of sesame seeds. We're going to do about 60 grams of sunflower seeds. And about 50 grams of pumpkin seeds. We are now going to stir everything together. And at this point, highly likely you're going to want to take your Danish dough whisk. I think it will be a lot easier. Just use our hands to incorporate the seeds. Take it off the scale, and we can just incorporate the seeds with our hands. Again, it's super wet and sticky. So just keep that in mind when you're about to stick your hands into this. Just get it all nice and blended well together. There we go. All right, I'm gonna get this off my hands. Then we are going to cover this and let it rise. Okay, so I have covered the bowl with plastic wrap. So you can see behind me, it is covered with plastic wrap, and I actually set it on my stove underneath a light to help with the room temperature heat and add a little warmth. And I'm gonna let that sit for about 24 hours. So I will come back tomorrow at around 5 o'clock, and then we'll go from there. Basically at that point, what I'm gonna do is check it out, make sure it's risen, maybe not completely doubled in size, but at least risen. Looks kind of spongy and a little bit softer, come together a little bit more. And then from that point on, we're going to pour it into a baking dish. And then from there, we're gonna let it sit for about 2 more hours at room temperature, and then we'll bake it. So stay with me. 24 hours from now, I'll come back and I will show you what we do next. The bulk rise has been for about 24 hours. The dough looks great. It actually looked great this morning, around 12 hours in or so. It started to have that nice kind of spongy look, and it looked almost double in size already. Now it's definitely double in size, and it has a spongy looking texture. Right now what I'm gonna do is actually have my daughter become my camera woman, and I'm going to pour the dough into a pan. So now I really wanna stress the importance of giving your baking pan a nice coat of oil. I used coconut oil spray. However you do it, just make sure you do a really nice job, because this dough can get sticky, and in the past I've had a hard time getting it out of my pan. So now I'm going to take the plastic wrap off, and I'm going to pour our dough mixture into our very nicely greased or coconut oiled baking pan. See how the bread mixture looks. So now we're just gonna pour it into the pan. You can still see how wet it is. It's definitely not your typical dough. All right, now I'm gonna flip it around and just use a spatula to scrape it into the pan. And then I'm just going to try to, once I get everything in there, I'm just going to try to gently flatten it so that everything, the level is even all around. And then lastly, before we bake it, we're going to put some seeds on top. Our chicken Starly just came in, if you can hear her in the background. She likes a treat for breakfast and dinner before she goes outside. Okay, so you can see I'm just trying to flatten it a little bit, get it in the corners, Make sure it's pretty level all around for baking purposes. And then I'm just gonna sprinkle a couple extra seeds on top. Just for decoration. There we go. Okay, sorry. All right, so now that the dough's in the pan, I'm going to cover it again with the same plastic wrap, and I'm going to let it rest for about 1.5 to 2 hours. Basically, it's another rise in the pan this time, and it's not going to quite get double in size. Now that the loaf is in the pan, what you're going to do at around the hour to hour and a half mark, depending on how your bread is looking, is preheat your oven. So I'm going to preheat at 400, and then when I put the bread into the oven, I'm going to turn it down to 375. I did want to share too where I get my recipe from. Like a lot of my recipes, I use the Artisan Sourdough Made Simple book, which is phenomenal. I love it. It is my favorite, all-time favorite bread making book. I did modify the recipe a bit, again, with the temperature of the oven, as well as some of the ingredients. But for the most part, that's exactly where I get the recipe from. Just so you know, it's an amazing book. I highly recommend it. You can get it on Amazon, and I'll post a link below for you. It's relatively inexpensive, so I definitely would recommend adding that to your collection. Okay, so you can see it hasn't fully risen up to the top, right? But it's definitely risen, and you can start to see some air bubbles coming up. So I know that this is ready to go in. It's definitely been 2 hours. It might have been even a little bit over 2 hours, just so you have an idea. It does take a while, and I have left it on our stove top, which we've also made dinner. We made some potatoes in the oven tonight, so the stove is definitely warm. So just to give you an idea, it's not gonna rise a whole amount, so don't expect it to come up right to the rim, okay? So I'm gonna put this in now. I'm gonna turn our heat down to 375. And I'm actually gonna bake this for about an hour and 15 minutes. That differs from the recipe in the book that I shared with you earlier. So just so you know, I'm baking it for about an hour and 15 minutes, just until you can see the sides will pull away from the pan, and then you know it's ready. I'm also going to tint it with tin foil to help prevent it from getting too dark. So I'm gonna put it in the oven. Here we go. Set it in the oven, and then I will put my tin foil over top, like so. Okay, the timer just went off. I'm going to take the bread out. I have checked on it periodically. I can smell it just to make sure it's ready. Now you can kind of see how it's pulled away from the edges, so it's definitely ready. I'm gonna set it up here. Take it out of the oven, and then I'm going to set it on a cooling rack in a second, and then after a few minutes I will actually take it out of the pan. It's out of the pan. You can see how this is not a loaf that rises too much. It's pretty dense on the inside. But this is a beautiful Danish rye loaf. Again, definitely want to make sure that you tent it if you have any issues with burning in your oven, so that it gets that nice caramel color on top, but not too dark. This looks great. I can't wait to cut into it. It's just out of the oven, so we're gonna wait, and as soon as it's cool, I can cut into it and show you the inside. All right, check out this beautiful loaf. Look at all of those beautiful seeds. You see the beautiful crumb? It's somewhat moist, it's dense. And now I will cut a little slice so that you can see how we cut it thinly. And then you just top it with, you know, whatever you like. Have a nice thin slice. Now, because I love bread and I love cheese, I've decided to just add a layer of delicious, extra sharp Vermont cheddar to mine, and I'm going to enjoy it. My family is going to love this for the holidays. I hope you try it. If you do, let me know how it goes. If you have any questions, post them in the comments. I'm always checking my comments. If you're enjoying this content, please like and subscribe. It helps me to know what you like and how I can help you. Thanks so much for watching. Happy baking.